mean she should know everything about every Empire ship and station, but certainly not the First Order era ones, and yet she always knows. Personally, I would have had Finn do this in the story to match his knowledge of the base, while justifying his split from the Saboteur side of the group. He can then suggest that Rey come with him to help cover him, or help with droid translations if need be. A simple tweak to a still absolutely ridiculous and arbitrary bit of writing. I mean, he was working sanitation on the base itself. He would have to know about the method of access to many areas, and getting past security would have been the norm. But we know what's being set up, and when it comes to JJ, he will do anything to get what he wants. Though the final act in particular clashes so many events together. It shell shocks the viewer with events and discourages questions. Lucky for us, I can slow the film right down and explore the entirety of what was done to create the scene. But that won't be until next time in 2073, or maybe a bit before then. Yes, folks, it's true, we have reached the end of this part. As you're well aware, these bastards take a huge amount of time to make, and they are created solely by myself in between other projects. I know many of you have lost faith as to its completion, but all I can say is that I will not allow it to go unfinished. I just need time. Especially considering we have so much to talk about in Part 5. Namely, the complete and utter assassination of Han Solo in The Force Awakens. Yeah, it'll be time to talk all about that. Not to mention this moment, which
Next time, baby.
We've met. No idea this is even happening, and the shields are still down. Rey and Finn then climb to the top of the inner oscillator for the sole reason of going back down once the scene is over. As was discussed, this is specifically for the theatrics of the scene. And, well, I suppose it's time. I've been building to this scene for the whole series in a way, and it's because there's so much to say. I'm currently looking at the basic notes for this one scene, and there are 11 individual topics for breakdown of what was cheapened to reach this emotional high point. We even have some essayception on the way. Strap in, folks. To start, let's talk about the time code. The third act of this film is rushed. Important events occur in quick succession, and they all lead to 4 important conclusions. 1. Successfully lowering the shields on Starkiller Base, allowing the assault. 2. The death of Han Solo. 3. The showdown between Rey and Kylo. 4. The destruction of Starkiller Base. These are all very dramatic scenes, and they are arguably payoffs for everything built in the film. The character work, the mechanical exposition of the plot, the theming, even the world building, all of it has been in favor of informing these climaxes, meaning we have many threads to consider. So, how did we get here? They arrived at the planet weapon using a light-speed brake. They crash-landed to then trek to an outpost. They had to search for and reach an entryway to the base. They then got through the base while taking out several stormtroopers without being discovered. They found and captured Captain Phasma. They found a control room with the ability to lower the planetary shields with Phasma's level of authorization. They send Phasma down a trash compactor and have yet to alert anyone of anything. They then look for Rey, construct a plan to assault a command center to search for her, and then they find her by chance.
You alright?
Yeah.
Now, what I just described is a lot. Like, on paper, that's quite an adventure, filled with ups and downs, luck and setbacks, all your standard stuff. However, believe it or not, all of those events take place over a stretch of 209 seconds. There is, of course, something to be said here about pacing. I would call the experience jarring, to say the least. None of these events have an associated or expected in-world process or weight. They all simply happen. Taking down the enormous laser weapon shield is as important as it was in episode 6, if not more so. In that episode, the event swallowed a massive chunk of screen time with plenty of characters struggling to achieve the goal. Many Ewok lives were lost. For this planet shield, it's all done on a whim. They imply it's as simple as a flip flip of a switch, done from a random control room about 30 seconds after they decide it's even possible, which is the same for all of the events in this base. As a result, the audience may not feel the weight. It's an incredible event that facilitates the victory. Keep in mind that when the shield goes down in episode 6, it essentially releases the fleet above from their kill box. The music swells, and their journey to the heart of the Death Star has hope once again. Here, with each component, they need to do X, and then X is done. The reason for this is that we're rushing to a payoff. What hasn't been realized is that the very payoff they are trying to generate is built from payoffs. By sapping their potency and their effects on the story, we will inevitably sap the potency of the major payoff. Now, we've been going through them all as this series has progressed, but so many nonsensical things have happened for us to be in the place we ended up. To throw in 3 examples, Rey's decision to run off into a random direction led to the troopers finding and reporting her immediately to Kylo. This gets her captured, thus leading to Finn's involvement in her rescue and the hyperspace thing, and both of them then being placed in the skybox via sudden required metal component removal to lead to a perfect viewing point, meaning they worked backwards to get these two here. Not to say that isn't the case for Han and Chewie as well. Even Kylo Ren, since the entire manner of his arrival requires the base having at least some awareness of inner intruders, yet any significant force would have stopped the heroes in any of these scenarios. If they had manpower that reflected the defense of a base like this, it would be over, which, on top of the rushing and the conveniences and the lack of weight behind many of the components, the plot overall is taking major hits to facilitate this moment. But we are far from done. Rey and Finn go up a ladder to watch the payoff and then immediately go back down, almost as if they were provided the box seats. Character logistics are incredibly important, as significant moments are made all the more impactful when we can view an event alongside those we care about in the story, to feel alongside them and to feel for them. The Fellowship had an unobstructed view of Gandalf and his battle because they had crossed the bridge while he remained. That makes so much sense you're not going to find anyone complimenting it. Perhaps some of you remember Ozymandias. To stay spoiler-free, a lot of characters end up in the same place for rather solid reasons. Something happens that can be viewed by the particular people we would likely want viewing it. Anyway, do you also remember how Luke was heading to the Falcon, as was Obi-Wan, and he crossed paths with Vader, leading them to be within viewing distance when Luke finally reaches the ship? You then remember how Finn and Rey went to this perch for no reason at all. They watched the drama along with the audience with a great view and then decided to simply go back down, where they should have been already? The reasoning for this placement error is that we need them to watch Han Solo die, but we need them to be unable to stop his decision, and they need to be out of range to shoot Kylo. The solution to these issues is to simply cut them out and paste them up into this little spot. The characters' locations are not driven by their interests, nor are they affected by the requirements of the plot. They are instead subservient to the whims of the writer. Perhaps it is more than fair to say these criticisms on their own do not hold much weight, but I am deliberately starting out with the low-impact flaws. Speaking of which, let's talk about the lighting.
It's so beautifully shot, that one long streak of light that comes in, and maybe it's overly symbolic that the streak of light comes from Finn and Rey down onto Han Solo, almost like they're there to pass the torch or whatever.
The light was shining through onto Kylo Ren as that scene went on, and Harrison Ford's like talking to him. He's like his son, and he hands him the lightsaber, and it's almost like, oh, he's actually going to come to the light side. And then the whole room gets dark because the sun's gone. And
finish him
when everything got dark, he went right back to the dark side. I thought that was kind of a cool touch. I like that part of it.
So, we have a very dark room with a beam of light shining through the door at the top. Once the star in the background is absorbed, it saps the light from the room, leaving it dark at the same time Kylo turns on Han. A beautiful piece of metaphor, right? Symbolism? Whatever.
The sun finally is drained from the sky, and you see the light go away, and now they're in this darkness, and darkness takes over.
Wonderful. though it's super on the nose. Not simply in the visual assessment made by everyone watching, but a signal noted by the characters in-universe as though it tells us it's going to affect Kylo's decision. Mechanically, however, the station did charge rather recently. Pre, during, and post-laser, the planet was lit up. Exquisitely, I might add. Now we have a full-on darkness. I suppose the way to understand this would be that there are 2 stars near the base, Tatooine style. They absorbed one and shot at the Hosnian system to now absorb a second sun to fire at the Resistance. Apparently, in-universe, it's called Starkiller because it kills stars. More on that soon enough. So I guess the number of stars in this system just so happened to match up with Kylo and his turn to the dark, creating the visual. These sources of light in both scenes are obviously chosen with intention. On one hand, we illuminate the hyper-scary fascist army,
Nazi!
and on the other, we shroud Kylo in darkness. Very clever. Now, it's time to really start digging in. The death of Han Solo. An event that's often argued to be Harrison Ford's doing.
When Harrison said he was coming back, I said, he finally got his martyr's death. Because he'd been wanting to be bumped off since, I think, Empire. That's why they froze him, so he could make up his mind later.
The idea being Harrison Ford doesn't want to be in Star Wars anymore. Perhaps he finds it all a bit cheesy and lame, or he hates the fandom related to it, or it looms over his career when he feels he has done better work. All of this may have led to the assumption that he would die in this installment, and that reality was spammed across the internet moments after the film's release. Though, as is often put by the greatest of writing genius, the value of storytelling is in the journey, not the destination. But, the destination too, though. Professor Friedenreich Riekengard Dunkelbund Hunderwasser. So, do I think there was a good way to kill Han Solo? Well, as with all media, I need to consume it to judge because there are theoretically strong executions for anything. I mean, who would have thought that one of the best movies of 2022 was the Cat film?
You're not gonna shoot a puppy, are you, Jack?
Yeah, in the face. Why?
At the very least, there's a spectrum. I was on board with Han having an exit in this story. It just needed to be created with respect, taste, and talent. How are they going to explore his character in this story? How would his death inform his journey? Would they maintain the character we've come to know while pushing him to his end? I've avoided really digging into Han Solo for the most part in this series, by design. Now feels like a far more suitable moment. The character of Han Solo was pretty definitive in his journey through the OT. He began as a morally dubious smuggler who owed a payment to a crime lord.
I'm the crime lord. He's supposed to pay me.
Stop. So he took an opportunity to cart off some old dude and a kid for a sizable amount of cash to presumably continue his life debt-free.
I ain't in this for your revolution, and I'm not in it for you, Princess. I expect to be well paid. I'm in it for the money.
As he progressed, he grew attached to the people he was paid to help, being tempted by money but finding something more to stay for. Han eventually completed his task but felt conflicted. After the hardship he faced with his passengers, he felt concerned for their safety.
I know what I'm doing.
Knowing the Empire and their stranglehold over the galaxy, he decided to help. He made a very conscious decision that put him on a different path. In Empire Strikes Back, Han continued to look out for those he had come to be attached to, putting his own life in danger to see they were taken care of, while always maintaining a sense of pride and accomplishment. He made sure people knew he was in the room, and he could be more than abrasive, yet he had a strong connection to these people underneath. This is the character, courageous, abrasive, assertive, sarcastic, caring, twattish, heart of gold. You know, he's a cowboy. Naturally, stronger feelings started to develop, and it turned into something more for Leia. She did end up on his ship, and they were stranded for some time. Only then Han made his way to an old friend, one that he didn't fully trust, yet needed desperately. This gamble resulted in his capture and shipment to Jabba only moments after he and Leia managed to be more honest about their feelings. When we see him again, he's as cocksure as always, with disbelief about Luke's growth, but a continued interest in pursuing the freedom of his friends and the galaxy. Once again acting to destroy the stranglehold the Empire has, while reaffirming his feelings for Leia. Granted, many talk about the wonkier characterization of Han in Return Return of the Jedi, but it's not the kind of damage we're discussing here. Jedi has him close out a hero, a fighter, a lover, and a friend, solidified as a legend when having started as just another smuggler in a cantina. Until now. Han Solo's story continues, and as of The Force Awakens, this is what we know. After the events of Episode 6, Han had a son with Leia. This son, for reasons we've only heard a few lines about in this film, turned from both the Skywalker and Solo families. He trained with another entity known as Supreme Leader Snoke, and now he acts as the Fist of the First Order, which is essentially the Empire 2.0. During these events, Han left Leia, or she split from him, and he started smuggling again. Apparently, he wasn't particularly good at it. He even managed to misplace his beloved Falcon while owing just about everyone in the galaxy money. Just to restate, Han Solo misplaced the Millennium Falcon.
I got your promise, not a scratch.
On top of that, he was amused by the idea of helping people when we meet him again. He wants Rey to join his crew due to her incredible abilities, and once she is kidnapped,
People are counting on us. The galaxy is counting on us.
he gets a resurgence of his older character, going the extra mile to lower the shields and rescue Rey despite limited interactions with her. As he is saving the galaxy, he sees an opportunity to talk to Kylo, the son that he spent no screen time with up to this point, and the one we've heard extremely little about despite hogging significant amounts of screen time. So, with that summary, let's dig in. Many people will label what they did to Han as the worst character assassination across the new trilogy. Personally, I think Luke's assassination is just a sliver worse in The Last Jedi.
I came to this island to die.
He was given a rather dirty character assassination on top of being utterly humiliated. He opened up as a completely different character, and he perished without even a semblance of a coherent journey.
So I didn't really have a beginning, a middle, and an end. I had a beginning and an end.
He was used for the benefit of other characters and a more generalized point about failure, whether you could fit his square peg of a character into that round hole of a plot or not. But what I will admit is that this pattern didn't start with Luke when it comes to Star Wars. Han Solo was a sort of blueprint. This debate has been drawn out for coming up to a decade now, and I've learned a lot about how people absorbed this portrayal. It's gonna take some time to break down. But how about we open with this?
What? You think people don't change in 30 years?
Alrighty, get ready for an essay within an essay within an essay within an essay. It may sometimes seem like this is just rambling, but I actually do structure this sort of stuff in a particular way, to perhaps act as a you are here sort of map. This whole thing is an essay going over the events of The Force Awakens scene by scene to then reach a conclusion. I paused that to engage in an essay going through each of the reasons the build up to this particular scene do not work. I paused that to start up an essay on Han Solo specifically and his development in the film, only to pause that to begin an essay on how characters are developed in fiction from one period of time to the next. You see, once I've set my groundwork and my arguments for characters, we can go back to Han specifically, and once we sort him out, we can go back to the scene specifically, and once all of that's finished, we can continue. All of us have known many people in our lives. There are plenty of people who do not develop significant character changes over long periods of time. People who are very one-dimensional, simplistic, static, or happy in that they have found a peace in their perspective and there's no need for change. Not to mention, there are those in their, let's say, 40s plus who've often become the person they were going to be. Few changes are to arrive as they enter the latter decades of their lives. Now, that's not to say you can't still change up to and over the age of 100. Of course, humans are complicated and unique when it comes to psychology, but the idea that you have to change over time is antithetical to the idea of many foundational character traits, oftentimes the ones rooted in emotional connections and experience. Ultimately, people can do anything in terms of personalities growing and changing. There is no strict guideline, like a person will change exactly this number of times in these ways. So, there is no definitive requirement that Han changes, nor is there an obligation that he remain the same. So what of appealing to reality? Is that always a fair basis? It must be said that writers create sandboxes with explicitly unrealistic elements in order to facilitate create new experiences while adhering to bounds they created. Being closer to reality in fiction is not tantamount to being a stronger story, though it will likely reduce the number of variables that require juggling. These variables can result in both detrimental and bolstering effects. For example, how about a character in a TV show that views himself and his friends as though they are in a TV show, commenting on the meta as he goes?
It makes every 10 minutes feel like the beginning of a new scene of a TV show. Of course, the illusion only lasts until someone says something they never say on TV, like how much their life is like TV. There, it's gone.
He got away.
Fact is,
Your ass is on the line.
my ass is on the line.
You just got off the phone with the mayor.
I just got off the phone with the mayor? Stop doing that!
I'm trying to help.
You take Annie's pen to make life more like Benny Hill or whatever you do.
I wouldn't do that. I hate bottle episodes. They're wall-to-wall facial expression and emotional nuance. I might as well sit in the corner with a bucket on my head.
Or how about a woman that was a 1,000-year-old demon granting wishes that cause undue harm to countless people prior to being made human with the intentions to do good while living a fulfilling life, but lacks a basic understanding of human custom, etiquette, and social cues, combined with very little tact.
Please go.
Please go. She's got replaced with have a nice day.
But I have their money. Who cares what kind of day they have?
Fine. You know what? I hope you die. Aren't we gonna kiss?
You know how it is with a spanking new boyfriend.
Yes, we've enjoyed spanking.
What about a man who lived through 10 different lives, powerless to stop rampant suffering he discovers throughout his travels as a result of rules created by his own people? People who are long dead. Rules he no longer values and decides to fight against.
They all died. Do you know who that leaves? Me! It's taken me all these years to realize the laws of time are mine, and they will obey me!
This is one of the many powers of fiction, to bring us something we simply can't get or wouldn't want to deal with in real life. So the idea that Han Solo should have changed because it's realistic for a human to do that over time is not only not necessarily realistic, it wouldn't be a strong enough appeal. The question is, why would we change the personality of someone like Han Solo? What could be a meaningful reason? Well, perhaps he occupies a position of power, involved directly with the absolute obliteration of remaining Empire remnants, only to become sympathetic to these victims after thousands of them have been hunted down, reminding him of his past life as well as that past holding an abhorrent mirror to his present. That could be interesting. What about Han pushing Luke away because he doesn't want his children or his family to be further influenced by the Jedi, informed by his experiences with Vader? This could create significant strife that erupts in a splintering of the Rebel Alliance and its goals for rebuilding a republic with or without the Force. Perhaps we discover there was a deeper reason he felt subdued hostility toward the Force in general, a potential history with the Empire we haven't yet explored. I suppose these could work. How about Han becoming stalwart in his opposition to the Empire, and he is the one that leads a charge on hunting them down, killing every last member, only for him to realize he has gone too far. I'm not opposed to giving Han something to work with, something to develop, but I want there to be a strong reason for it, something that falls in line with his journey, something that incorporates what we've seen from his life experience. I wouldn't want to apply a life to him that doesn't comport whatsoever with what we knew, and so with all that in mind, what meaningful changes did we get?
We need your help.
My help?
What was the second time?
You're Han Solo.
I used to be.
Han Solo was, as I went over, a war hero. A general, more than earning his reputation and rank by being one of the two major elements that brought an end to the first Death Star and being instrumental in the destruction of the second. He was not forced to do either, and they both represented a horrifying threat to every planet in the galaxy. He chose to become that from a selfish, money-oriented smuggler, a guy who didn't know much motivation beyond a paycheck.
Good's your reward if you ain't around to use it.
By the end of the trilogy, there was no question of Han being absolutely invested in the galaxy. He even agreed to lead the strike team before knowing whether he would be accompanied by his friends.
It's gonna be rough, pal. I didn't want to speak for you.
And now we have him back. Quite literally, he is back doing what we saw him doing originally, complete with a character reset. The only significant difference being he is now incompetent. To sum up what we've been through since the start of this series, the writer has removed the development Han had over 3 films, in more ways than one. Of course, we still see the incredible blaster shots and pilot piloting so that older fans aren't lost entirely, despite both of those feats being bizarre when further considered. Perhaps more concerning than the veneer of the bygone hero's abilities is his intelligence. He barely offers a single wisdom-fueled insight for our new heroes, and just as he starts to ramp up a sense of the man we knew, he is unceremoniously slid out of the franchise. By the end, he is a cowardly, selfish, incompetent, stupid, confused, deadbeat dad. A man who abandoned his family and the galaxy. Star Wars The Force Awakens very thoroughly assassinated Han Solo. He sits with Luke on the prestigious shelf of all-time greatest character defilements in media, and nothing has been done to correct it since. With that said, did we gain anything from this assassination? What was meaningful about this journey for Han Solo? Well, it gave the new virtuous characters time to show him how he is being cruel, time for them to teach him about his own ship, time for him to grovel about a relationship he helped destroy. But most importantly, he is used as a springboard for Kylo Ren's story. Ben Solo can have a big character boost as he is now the man who killed Han Solo. You know, the gun guy from the original trilogy. And that is the most meaningful thing Han offers this film. His departure, as opposed to any other form of exploration or growth derived from this journey later in his life. Of course, once Rey is kidnapped, Han flips the script, choosing to save the galaxy and rescue Rey at great risk. But that's almost a betrayal of the new character the writers have provided us. One of the many interpretations drawn from this decision is that Han is one of the old heroes. In fact, it would seem it represents a microcosm of the attitude that Disney is done with the old. Bring in the new. The new can sap the old prior to their rejection and move right along, enjoying a passionate audience ready to experience every adventure Disney is able to excrete. But this didn't work out so well. As we've discussed, there was a scene in which Luke mourned for Han Solo during The Last Jedi, and it was cut despite the sheer level of useless scenes in the film.
It shows Luke was putting on a facade in front of Rey and even Chewie. The fact that he could let his emotions out when he was by himself would have made an impact on the audience, because it allowed them to grieve the loss of Han Solo just the way Luke felt it. You know, they had time for me to milk that big alien, but to show any human emotion, nah, we don't have time for that.
Luke was given the same treatment as Han. These characters have traits and investments. They have motivations based on who and what they love. You cannot ignore those things just to tell your own story. Disney have made some hollow attempts at fixing their canon in post for the sequels. I imagine they've realized the damage is causing a significant bleed. I mean, hell, they've managed to reduce one of the most successful movie franchises of all time down to a streaming service. In any case, you'll find attempts at repairing this story all over third-party iterations, like the appearance of Han Solo's funeral in one of the visual novels. It was mysteriously forgotten about in the movies themselves. Qui-Gon Jinn had a funeral, but not Luke Skywalker and not Han Solo. Regardless, let's try an alternative angle. A character journey leading to change can be incredibly endearing to watch because it can very easily comport to a real-life change we have previously witnessed in someone or in ourselves. Additionally, it should come as no surprise that stories, when well crafted, have the power to alter our perspectives on all kinds of significant issues. We can discover a change in ourselves as a result of seeing it in someone else, or seeing a lack of it in someone else. But rules and regulations change across the board for different ideas about where you start and how development takes place for all kinds of characters. This is a large and complex spectrum understood with countless variables. Most characters have fundamental elements, something at the core that defines them, something that makes them different from the next character, something that will echo through their choices and changes. They can become different people, but there will still be a foundation that sees the prior build supporting the new one. Luke Skywalker loves and will always fight for his family, no matter what.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Steve Rogers believes in the individual, as well as their right to choose when their power is contributed to any given circumstance, on top of the individual taking responsibility when they make mistakes. Jinn's world is defined by Sun. There's nothing he wants more than to be with her, to protect her, provide for her, love her, and if she were to go, he would have no reason to stay. Yeah, A gosh darn Lost reference, how about that? Jaime Lannister will always serve honor, be it to the people, his family, his friends, or himself.
For every one of the million people in that city, innocent or otherwise.
To be honest, I never really cared much for them. Innocent or otherwise.
No, we don't talk about Season 8. Your character could have a core vice or virtue guiding them through their lives as other elements of them change. With introspection, it can become obvious this applies to yourself. Something core about you that has permeated through every thought process you've ever had. Perhaps it even acts as a simultaneous blind spot for potential growth. A kind of tragedy where your greatest strength is your greatest weakness. So, when you have someone disappear for a long time, yes, you can have them change in a relatively significant way, but if you change what was most consistent about them without events to support it in the first place, then you threaten every single viewer's understanding of the character as well as their investment in the character.
The hardest thing I had to do was his radical reimagining of that character. So, you had to figure out your backstory, even though it's not important to the audience, it's important to the actor to know, hey, what happened between the last one and this one, where the most optimistic guy in the galaxy becomes a suicidal, cranky old man telling people to get off his lawn. It's just a loop that I didn't really understand. I mean, obviously, a lot's happened between, but I had to, like I say, make up backstories that besides picking that Kylo Ren, picking the new Hitler to be the next Hope, that's on me. But there had to be more to me to justify even cutting off my telepathic communication with my sister. So, I mean, but that's my job. I mean, I'm not the one that... And there were practical things, because JJ had a much different vision for what was going to happen in 8.
How can two very different characters be considered the same, with the only explanation being time having passed off screen after a traumatic event that we're only given some clues about?
I'm going to burn down the library. Don't try and stop me. And then Yoda raises a finger, does it for me, and I go, but that's just saying the Jedi text! Hey, make up your mind. That's Luke. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. I said, oh, okay, not only is he a broken man, he's certifiably insane. No, I can play that.
An obvious example of how to achieve this same journey while providing the flesh it requires can be found in the God of War franchise. Kratos is very specifically characterized in the original 3 games, but tragedy afflicts everyone around him while swallowing the world he loves as a result of the actions he takes. The last we see of him involves what is easily interpretable as a suicide attempt after realizing his grief and guilt have not subsided upon killing the gods, nor has his rage. His final act, committed in the hopes of providing some relief to a world ravaged as a result of his own actions. When we meet him again, many years later, he is desperate to control his anger, avoid conflict with the gods, and to stay away from other people. A worthy set of traits to develop considering the extensive events of the 3rd installment and the time having passed since. It was an enormous gap, and 2 different characters are on either side, but we were given all the information we required to understand the change prior to that very gap, with his fundamentals being more than intact. The times in which you could indeed change someone dramatically off-screen would be if they weren't established or developed alternatively in the first place, almost defeating the purpose of the change being portrayed. Though this can be implemented well, like recalling embarrassing histories or sharing an event that informs the inspiration for a character's perspective in the present. When you are established even briefly and they have a dramatic off-screen change, you have to respect that the audience is being delivered a different person with your new idea, and you are asking them to accept otherwise within this continuity. This can once again be understood as a reflection on life. People you haven't interacted with for a decade that you meet once again is akin to meeting a brand new person in many meaningful ways. You don't typically retain the same experience and feeling for them as you did so long ago, until of course reaffirming the presence of those traits you grew attached to in the first place. And yet, the sequel trilogy will demand that we inject how we feel about Han, Luke, and Leia into these these new flesh puppets. I'm not even talking about the difference between good and bad development here. When it comes to an audience's average perception in relation to continuity, instant dramatic changes for secondary characters will be rather jarring, it's baffling for primary characters, and it's horrendous for iconic characters. But these guys aren't just iconic, they are legendary in fiction, and you have changed them without allowing the audience to understand why.
Guess what term does not suit me when I am sitting next to you, sir?
What's that?
Iconic.
And yet you may ask, well, what could they do? Mark, Carey, and Harrison are all quite old now. We can't make a trilogy to show how they may have changed over time, so what exactly do you expect? Well, the answer is simple.
Oh my God, no, it's just a terrible idea. I had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and I can't really see anything that I could add to it.
Either do not challenge the characters whatsoever and let the assumption reign that they had an uninterrupted history of consistent adventures or interactions that did not challenge or push their fundamental views and values, or develop their changes according to the events we have seen. Though I've always been a fan of option 3, do not bring them back at all. The first option isn't possible because Disney wished to prop up the new heroes by comparison to the old, siphoning their pre-planned corpses. The second option isn't possible because it requires significant effort and discipline, and the third option is impossible for obvious reasons.
Just follow the money.
This leads me to my next point. Han Solo didn't require a change. A character at the base never requires one necessarily. Despite that, he has been given an arc in the originals. Unfortunately, especially with video essayists or the film school experts, there is this weird myth being propagated that every character must have an arc.
Every time someone's like, I like it, I'm like, why? I'm gonna go over the top 10 reasons everybody seems to like Rogue One. Number 1, the fun cast of characters. The movie definitely had a lot of characters, a lot of static characters. So, Forrest Whitaker guy, no arc there, no arc there. He's one way when we meet him and he's the same way when he dies. The only character who kind of pretends to have an arc is Jyn Erso.
Now, I don't want to be seen publicly disagreeing with a woman, but you have to ask what the reason behind this is. Jenny raises this counter because people have claimed to find the Rogue One characters interesting. Now, if you ask me, the characters in Rogue One aren't strictly poor because they lack arcs. It's a little more complicated than that. As an example, I think there's a significant difference in seeing a character arc taking place and watching a character learn something. Plenty of iconic characters would fit this bill. Indiana Jones goes from being a strong-willed, good-hearted, courageous archaeologist explorer with a flair for violence and quick wit at the beginning to a strong-willed, good-hearted, courageous archaeologist violence and quick wit by the end of the trilogy. Of course, in Raiders, he goes from more of a skeptic to having a greater understanding and respect of the supernatural. In Temple of Doom, his investment in the fortune of his adventures eventually subsides for a further focus on the life being lost along the way, and in The Last Crusade, he manages to reconcile a stronger relationship with his father. What I find notable is that he is still, for the most part, the same man. He has learned certain things through certain events that will have consequences in his life, but this is not like watching Walter White's journey or Oscar Schindler or Sarah Connor or Michael Corleone. Characters that are fascinating at least in part because we can watch them go through such significant changes. Indiana Jones, however, is a fantastic, rock-solid, interesting character as a result of understanding who he is and watching him deal with ever-changing circumstances while achieving his goals throughout all 3 of the movies in the franchise. The value in this case is being derived from what the character believes in and fights for being believed in and fought for. The consistency is precisely what makes these characters enjoyable to watch. But that's just one example. How about Dr. King Schultz, another good-willed character, a bounty hunter primarily outwitting his opponents, utilizing a strong awareness of the law with a righteous streak to push him into a more reckless territory when dealing with injustice. A righteous streak that costs him his life. How about Peter Venkman, a womanizing smart mouth whose comedic timing could bring tears to the most cynical among among us. He is once again the same at the start as he is at the end, and yet a fantastic character. In conclusion, characters do not require an arc to be interesting. There are many things one can do to bring a character back without considerably changing them as people over time, and character assessment is far more complicated than something so prosaic as, do they have an arc? Let's not forget that some of the most iconic villains of all time are villainous precisely because they do not or cannot grow or learn and thus do not have arcs. To bring us back, Han Solo did not need to have any significant character change or arc. He could have just been himself, like Leia was. Well, not really, but you know what I mean. Han could have been left as we knew him. Instead, they rolled his firmware back and patched him with several awful traits on top, only to have the same realization and change to then pause as he enters his death scene. Now, before I read the next part of this script, I'd like to remind you this was written prior to 2022. The poetry is not lost on me. Imagine in a later Indiana Jones film they decided to make him despondent, depressed, and suicidal about most aspects in his life, only for him to learn in the end that he has something to live for, that he should spend time with his friends and family. A great lesson for people all over the world, right? Well, sure, but that arc isn't compatible with this character in this continuity. Luke Skywalker was no different, and neither was Han Solo. They have traits, characteristics, and goals. Do not undo the work they went through in the original trilogy, a work you are pilfering to get your own off the ground, only to repeat those beats once again or forget them entirely. It's incongruent with their own nature outside of suffering amnesia. It spits on the continuity and work of those you are trying to build on top of, and it's had drastic effects on the average audience member's enjoyment, whether at the time or in retrospect. Han, Luke, and so many others deserved better. With that, I end my comments on character arcs, which finishes my section on the assassination of Han Solo, which means we're back to the rundown of the many flawed pieces of build-up for this scene. A scene assessment that on completion will send us back to the scene-by-scene analysis for the whole movie. Hasn't this been a ride? So, let's talk about the emotional impact on the characters in relation to this scene, starting with Rey. Rey is absolutely horrified by the death of Han Solo. Daisy Ridley puts in a reaction to match that anyway. The mouth is very agape. The audience understands she has lost someone she cares dearly for. She is distraught, and so we must ask, why? As Kylo pointed out, Rey sees Han as a father figure. This connection is created the moment she meets him, developed about 4 minutes later, and banked upon during this scene. Their entire connection amounts to a handful of minutes. At the climax of their relationship, Han simply provides her a pistol and offers her a job. There is very little to talk about in terms of inspiration, connection, or mentorship. Han does rescue her, but as is made abundantly clear by the scene, Rey takes time to appreciate Finn for that. Han is almost ignored. It's unclear if this was a mistake from JJ, as we see another example all too soon. Regardless, it shows a lack of concern from her for Han. So why does Rey care so much? Who is this man, other than the guy who made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs? Luke had a long history with Ben before his death, made abundantly clear by the story. More importantly, we saw Ben's